I want to wrap this up with Ed Luce because we have major ICE revelations to get to, and Epstein follow-up, and also Jack Smith gets his public testimony today. But at the same time, this was a big event on the world stage. As Caddy points out, Europe has finally got the message. And they also, I think to an extent, there was some standing up to Trump that happened that led to the outcome that I don't think was the outcome he wanted, but at least he can put his name on it, like he has with many hotels around the world. You have a new opinion piece that really encapsulate this, Ed, for the Financial Times, entitled America's Barbarians Inside the Gates. And you write in part, quote, historical sensibility tells us it is the barbarians who storm the gates. In today's America, it is the other way around. Inside the citadel, the hordes are incinerating America's traditions of law, civility, and restraint, the civic-minded cry in the wilderness. Like so much else, the U.S. Institute of Peace, the Kennedy Center, the Versailles-style White House ballroom, other people's Nobel Prizes, Trump is rebranding the U.S. as his own. As America prepares to commemorate its 250th anniversary, the Republic is flirting with its own funeral. Don't disagree, looking at what's happened there just in the past 24 hours, Ed. Bigger picture, who is he pleasing as he was insulting Europe across the board? Who actually benefited or would like to have seen what went down over the past 24 hours? And did Trump get, after insulting Europe, listing a series of lies and factually incorrect statements, belting out, all I need is Greenland, all I need is a piece of ice, NATO owes it to me, kind of childlike statements, kind of phrased in just few words, almost as if, you know, he needed to pound the podium on top of it, give it to me. Did Europe and NATO give the president actually what he was asking for, or is it any different than what's already been in place for years and years and years? And what's the big picture in terms of consequences here?
That's a great question, Mika. I mean, no, Europe didn't actually change its position to the extent that we know what Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, actually agreed with Trump. And by the way, Mark Rutte, it didn't have Danes and Greenlanders in the room. So, and any deal that would involve, if this deal does involve, giving slices of sovereignty, Guantanamo-style sovereignty to new American bases in Greenland, would need the ratification of the Danish Parliament and the Greenland people. And after being beaten up, insulted, etc., I doubt they're in the mood to say, oh, well, you deserve, you know, some sovereignty over our country. Because Trump got, with the rest of Mark Rutte's alleged deal, what America has always had, which is the right to have bases and the right to have, you know, mineral exploration rights, etc. I think what Europe has learned in the last few days is something that people like Mark Carney have known for the last year, which is that with Trump, there is no win-win deals. There's the deal that he believes is the art of the deals, where he wins and you lose, and you are seen to lose. And we saw all sorts of manifestations of this in Davos. Christine Lagarde, who you've probably had on the show and therefore know, she's a very gracious, very professional diplomat, former head of the IMF, now head of the European Central Bank. She stood up and walked out of a speech that Howard Lutnick was giving because he said that Europe was dead. I think what's finally dawned upon those Europeans who are a little bit late to it dawning in their minds, but what's finally dawned to the stragglers, to everybody except Mark Rutte, is that Trump, in his bones, has contempt for Europe. He used words like, you're stupid, you're a waste of time. I mean, he was openly insulting to their faces, as he is sort of almost daily on social media. And therefore, as Mark Carney said, this is a rupture. This isn't a sort of another of these sort of mini dramas that gets resolved and then we move on to the next thing. This is a deep and profound teachable moment for the whole of Europe. And I don't think things can ever really go back to what they were before. So that's the big picture. And the net result on Greenland is where he was in the first place. as you showed Brit Hume saying on Fox. This is not the art of any kind of deal that you or I would consider to be a deal.
Let me just push back a little bit. I think releasing private text messages is a great way to build friendships with world leaders. No, it's been fairly disastrous in terms of European-U.S. relations. And I think, Vaughn, I mean, what we covered this morning, a ceremonial board of peace, I don't really know what the charter powers are for that entity, but that underscores just how bad the rupture is. In a theoretical universe in which Donald Trump was more conciliatory and getting along with these people and there were actually productive conversations, you can imagine maybe some of these countries saying, sure, I mean, obviously we're not going to pay $1 billion to enter this board of peace, but yeah, we can participate in some sort of multilateral entity to help reconstruct Gaza and promote, you know, conflict resolution around the globe. There is no one from Europe on that stage, or was no one from Europe on that stage. It is a list of semi-autocratic countries and Trump allies. How disappointed is the White House that there is no one on the stage, or are they totally comfortable with the idea that you do not have to have European countries, the likes of which Scott Bessent called, what did he call Denmark? Irrelevant? Yeah, maybe you don't need irrelevant countries in there.
Donald Trump, the American president, literally with all of those folks standing behind him, including the dictator of Belarus, including the authoritarian leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, including monarchs from the Middle East, said everyone in this room is a star, the most important people in the world, the most powerful. And you know, the one leader so far that has committed $1 billion to the Board of Peace overnight, saying if his assets are unfrozen, Vladimir Putin, invited to the Board of Peace here. And in so many ways, this goes back to a conversation I had 1 week ago with a former Pentagon official who now works in the defense industry and was having conversations with European military partners. And he told me that if Greenland goes, so goes the allies in Europe. 1 week later, Greenland hasn't gone, but it was the mere threat that pushed Europe to step away. And Mark Carney said that if you are not at the table, then you are on the menu. And who proved his point just 24 hours after that? Donald Trump himself, saying that the world is afloat because of the United States, and specifically when it came to Canada, that Canada lives because of the United States. Dismissive and derogatory and offensive to what is the key trading partner and longtime ally of the United States.
And, Caddy, no concern about offending our key allies, longtime allies. Apparently from the administration, from Howard Lutnick to Scott Bessent, all the way up to the President of the United States over these last couple of days in Davos. On the Board of Peace, as the Wall Street Journal wrote yesterday in its editorial page, Mr. President, we have a Board of Peace. It's called NATO. This is something else. We're asking people to pay $1 billion, including, as Vaughn just said, Vladimir Putin being invited nearly 4 years now into his war in Ukraine. So as you leave Davos, as these leaders leave Davos, what is the state of play right now? How would you sum all of this up, if you can?
Yeah. So I think what European leaders are trying to do is look at where the relationship still functions, look at the way the militaries still work together. The European, at a functional level, they still talk to each other, they still cooperate. They're trying to look at where the businesses still work with each other. Business leaders here have told me they still have very good relationships with their American counterparts and with the American market. They're trying not to look at this Board of Peace. They're trying, Keir Starmer has already said, we're not going to have any part of this. They're trying to sort of glide over the difficult bits. Greenland, the Board of Peace, in order to get as much American attention and as much as American commitment as they can to the one single issue that Europe thinks is most critical, and that is Russia and the threat from Russia. European countries very keenly feel the threat from Russia, and they know that Ukraine can't win this war without American help. So they're prepared to swallow an awful lot. They'll take NATO light, they'll take trade relationships diminished in order not to push America away completely. But as everyone's been saying this morning, they have realized a fundamental reality, which is that something has shifted. And that is the problem in the long term for the United States. It will need Europe again. At some point, it's going to need Europe in what is the real battle of the 21st century, which is the threat from China. And it'll need European businesses and it'll need European leaders, and those European leaders may not be there in the way that they have because of the way that Donald Trump talks about them, treats them, comes here to Davos and belittles them. And I think that is the problem for Europe at the moment. It's a kind of how do we man up, get ourselves defending ourselves so that we don't have to rely on the United States in this way that we do at the moment. But make no mistake, we understand that this relationship is not what it was.